In an unexpected and deeply emotional moment, Hollywood legend Denzel Washington broke down in tears during a live TV appearance after receiving a surprise call from Burkina Faso's President Ibrahim Traoré. What was said on that call left not only the audience, but viewers around the world completely stunned. This powerful exchange proved that true leadership and respect can cross borders, cultures, and even fame. It was meant to be just another regular late-night talk show. The audience erupted in cheers as Denzel Washington stepped onto the stage smiling, calm, and iconic. The host greeted him with excitement, cracked a few jokes, and played clips from his latest role. But behind Denzel's warm laughter, there was a quiet heaviness in his eyes, as if part of his heart was somewhere else. Halfway through the show, the host leaned in with a grin. "Denzel," he said, "we've got a little surprise for you tonight, a live call from someone very far away." Denzel blinked. "What kind of surprise?" he asked. Suddenly, the screen behind him lit up. A flag appeared, Burkina Faso. Confused murmurs spread through the crowd. Then came a voice, strong, respectful, gentle. "Good evening, Mr. Washington. This is Ibrahim Traoré, President of the Transition of Burkina Faso." Denzel froze. The room fell completely silent. For the first time in the show's history, you could hear nothing but the sound of one man's breath caught in his throat. No one, not the host, not the crew, not the audience, could have predicted what would come next. Denzel's hands trembled as the president continued. His French-accented English was calm, but every word came from the heart. "You don't know me, Mr. Washington, but when I was 14 years old, I was just a barefoot boy in Burkina Faso. I saw you in glory. I saw a black man not begging, not afraid but strong, and crying for justice." Denzel blinked rapidly. That night, Traoré continued, "I told my mother, one day, I'll fight for people to like him." The host was speechless. Denzel covered his mouth in disbelief. Years later, Ibrahim went on, "When my people needed someone to stand up, I remembered your strength, your words, your eyes. I didn't stand because I was fearless. I stood because I had seen what courage looked like in you." The room remained silent. Denzel slowly lowered his hand, eyes red and glistening. "You're telling me I helped shape a president?" he asked quietly. "No, sir," Ibrahim replied. "You helped shape a man who refused to kneel to injustice." A single tear rolled down Denzel's cheek. "Thank you, my brother," he whispered. The audience gasped softly. But then the president said something that shocked everyone even more. Denzel leaned forward. The host sat frozen. "I speak to you today not just as a president," Ibrahim said, "but as a man who owes a debt. And in Burkina Faso, when someone saves your soul, we don't forget." Denzel shook his head humbly. "No, please, I didn't, President." Traoré interrupted gently. "Mr. Washington, I'm officially inviting you to be honored in Ouagadougou. But more than that, I want to name a leadership school after you. A place where our children will learn to stand tall just as I learned. By watching you." Another gasp rippled through the crowd. The host whispered, "Wow." Denzel's voice cracked. "Mr. President, I don't deserve that." Traoré smiled softly. "That's exactly why you do." The screen went black. The call ended. And there, on national television, in front of millions of people, Denzel Washington buried his face in his hands and wept. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming truth that sometimes a single life can echo across oceans and generations. But this was only the beginning. Within 24 hours, Denzel was packing his bags. Burkina Faso was calling, and what was waiting there would shake the world. He didn't sleep that night. He kept replaying Ibrahim Traoré's words in his mind. His eyes stayed red long after the cameras had stopped rolling. By morning, social media had exploded. Hashtag Denzel and Traoré acute was trending in over 20 countries. Fans, journalists, and world leaders were praising the emotional exchange. Some even called it the most powerful television moment in decades. But while the world was reacting, Denzel stayed quietly packing, not for a movie, but for something that felt sacred. He booked the next available flight to Burkina Faso. No entourage, no media, just him, a small backpack, and a heart full of emotions he couldn't put into words. As the plane lifted off, He looked out the window and whispered, "I don't know what I'm walking into, but I know I have to go." Back in Ouagadougou, President Traoré stood by a window in the palace, watching the distant runway. One of his aides asked, "Should we prepare the press?" Traoré shook his head. No cameras, no speeches, just truth. Something meaningful was about to unfold. Neither man knew it yet, but within 48 hours they would cry again, this time together. When Denzel's plane landed, there were no reporters, no red carpets, just silence. A single black SUV waited on the tarmac. One man stood beside it, dressed simply, with no military medals. It was him, President Ibrahim Traoré. Denzel stepped off the plane slowly. Their eyes met. No words were needed. They embraced not as a celebrity and a leader but as two men whose lives had quietly crossed paths across continents. "I'm honored you came," Ibrahim said. Denzel smiled faintly. "I didn't come as a star. I came as a brother." The SUV drove them through dusty roads, past neighborhoods, marketplaces, and barefoot children waving as they passed. No one knew who was inside. They arrived at a modest home made of sun-worn clay and tin. "This was my home," Traoré said quietly. He opened the door. Inside, no guards, no luxury. Just old photographs, a woven mat, and silence. Then Traoré handed Denzel an old, wrinkled picture. In it, a young boy clung to the hand of an older woman. "She raised me," he said. "When my parents worked day and night she fed me, bathed me, told me stories of strength." Then softly, "And she's still alive." They drove another hour down winding village roads. No one spoke much. Denzel kept looking at the photo, at her gentle eyes, her wide smile, the quiet strength of someone who had lived a hard life with grace. "Where is she now?" Denzel asked. Traoré's jaw tightened. "She still works cleaning classrooms in a rural school at 85. Denzel whispered. Traoré acute nodded. "She never asked for help," she said. "God gave me legs. I'll use them until he takes them." When they arrived, the school was worn but full of life. Children ran barefoot, drawing shapes in the dirt with sticks. Then she appeared, bent but proud, holding a broom. The same woman from the photo. Denzel stepped out of the car, frozen. Traoré walked toward her. She looked up and her eyes filled with tears. "Ibrahim," she whispered. He rushed into her arms. "Mama Hawa." They wept. Then Denzel walked forward. She looked at him and gasped. Her hands trembled. You're him," she said, gently touching his face. And in that quiet courtyard in Burkina Faso, time stood still. 3 souls, 3 stories. One moment that melted hearts across the world. The world had already been moved, but what came next would shake an entire nation. Mama Hawa sat quietly between Denzel Washington and President Ibrahim Traoré, beneath the shade of an old baobab tree near the village school. Her hands were worn from years of hard work, her back slightly hunched, but her voice remained warm, full of life. She began to share stories of a young Ibrahim who used to cry in her arms during cold nights, of the time he gave her his only piece of mango so she wouldn't go to bed hungry. Denzel listened with a softness in his eyes that the world rarely saw. Then Mama Hawa reached into the pocket of her faded apron. "I kept this all these years," she said. She unfolded a yellowed piece of paper. The handwriting was messy, clearly a child's. It read, "One day I will be a leader, and I will find you, Mama. I promise." Traoré gasped. He remembered writing it when he was just 9 years old, on her birthday, after she gave him her only piece of bread. Denzel wiped away a tear. "She held on to hope," he said quietly. "That's the most powerful kind of faith." Suddenly, a young student came running toward them, barefoot and laughing, holding a cracked plastic ball. "Mama, will you play?" And she did, still barefoot, still smiling. But something shifted inside Denzel in that moment. He was no longer just visiting. He had found something sacred. That evening, Denzel and President Traoré returned to the palace, but the mood was different now. Both men were quiet, thoughtful. Then Traoré stood up. "I want to show you something I've never shown anyone outside my family," he said. He led Denzel down a private corridor, stone walls, quiet footsteps, no guards. At the end, he unlocked a heavy wooden door. Inside was a small, Dimly lit room filled with old books, journals, maps and one large framed photo, Mama Hawa and a young Ibrahim, both laughing. "This is my real treasure room," Traoré said. Denzel was speechless. The president picked up an old notebook. Inside were his earliest writings, his dreams for Burkina Faso. "All of this started with her," he said. "I'm here because she believed I was worth something, even when I had nothing." Denzel gently touched the notebook page. "You lead like a son who remembers love," he said. Traoré acute nodded. "And I want the world to know leadership isn't about power, it's about gratitude." The room fell silent. To great men, one mission, to honor the woman who shaped a president. Then Denzel had an idea that would surprise everyone, especially Mama Hawa. At dawn, Denzel sat on the palace terrace, watching the sun rise over Ouagadougou. Mama Hawa's face, her laughter, her strength had kept replaying in his heart. Ibrahim joined him. "I had a thought," Denzel said, sipping his tea. "Let's give her the honor she never asked for." Traoré smiled slowly. "I was hoping you'd say that." That very afternoon, quietly, without informing the press, they returned to the village school with a small team. Children gathered. Teachers stood silently. Mama Hawa looked confused. "What's happening?" Then President Traoré knelt in front of her, holding a small velvet box. Inside was a golden medallion, engraved with her name and the national seal. "For your service to this nation," he said, his voice trembling. "As a mother, a teacher, and a guardian of hope." The children began to clap. Then Denzel stepped forward, tears in his eyes. "And from the world of cinema," he said, pulling out an envelope. "I spoke with my producer this morning. Your story will become a movie, and every cent will go toward building schools in your name." Mama Hawa dropped to her knees, sobbing. She had spent her life giving, and now, for the first time, she was receiving. But the biggest surprise was still to come. 3 days later, Denzel Washington returned to Los Angeles for a live interview on one of America's biggest talk shows. The plan was light-hearted: red carpets, upcoming projects, laughter. But behind Denzel's smile, something had shifted. As the cameras rolled, and the host asked about his trip to Africa, Denzel paused. "Can I take a call?" he asked. The host looked confused. "Live," he chuckled. Denzel nodded. The crew scrambled, but within moments, the screen behind him lit up. President Ibrahim Traoré, live from Burkina Faso. The studio went completely silent. "Mr. Washington," Traoré said warmly, "your visit reminded us that kindness is not limited by borders." Then he added, "You honored my people. Today, I want to honor someone you inspired." He gestured to his side. Mama Hawa appeared on screen, holding a phone, her eyes shining. The audience gasped. Denzel's lips quivered. His hands trembled. Traoré continued, "You reminded the world that even those with the loudest voices must sometimes pause to listen." And then, in broken English, Mama Hawa whispered, "Thank you, my son." Denzel dropped his head and wept on live TV, and so did millions watching around the world. Within minutes, the clip went viral. It wasn't about movies anymore. It was something deeper. Twitter exploded. Hashtag Mama Hawa, hashtag President of Hearts, hashtag Denzel breaks silence. From Paris to Johannesburg, Tokyo to Atlanta, people began posting stories of the women who raised them. An old photo of Traoré hugging Mama Hawa in her kitchen became a global symbol. Major news networks paused political segments to play that moment again. Denzel breaking down, Traoré speaking gently, Mama Hawa simply saying, "Thank you." CNN called it the most human thing ever caught on live TV. But then something even more incredible happened. Donations started pouring in. A humble GoFundMe page created quietly by one of the village school's students had a modest goal of $10,000. Within 2 hours, it crossed $1 million. People didn't just watch, they felt. And they acted. In a world so divided, the story of a soldier's promise, a mother's love, and an actor's tears was bringing strangers together. But while the world was celebrating, Mama Hawa was fading. She had one final request. By the 6th day of this unforgettable week, Her body was tired. She had smiled for days, hugged dozens, spoken with presidents and stars, but her body whispered, "It's time." She asked to speak privately with Denzel and Ibrahim. They entered her small village room. No cameras, no microphones, just three souls. "I'm old," she said softly. Her voice was fragile, but steady. "I won't see the next planting season." They shook their heads, pleading with her to rest, to fight. But she smiled. "I have no fear. My only wish is that no child in Burkina Faso ever goes to school hungry." A tear rolled down Traoré's cheek. She reached for Denzel's hand. "You tell stories that matter. The world listens to you. Tell the story." Then she reached under her pillow and pulled out a small scarf, faded, torn, lovingly stitched. It was the one young Ibrahim had once tied around her arm when he played president. She placed it in his hands. "My first medal," she whispered. And then her final words, "Take care of each other." They both held her as she closed her eyes. Outside, the sun was rising. So was her legacy. President Ibrahim Traoré stood in silence beside Mama Hawa's bed, still holding the scarf she gave him. The room smelled of shea butter and old books. Denzel Washington knelt at her feet, head bowed, shoulders trembling. Then quietly, Traoré spoke. "She gave me everything when I had nothing. Now I must give everything back." He turned to Denzel and held up the scarf like a royal emblem. "We will build something in her name. A school, a garden, a future." Denzel looked up, eyes swollen. Yes, we will. I'll help." Outside, people had already gathered. Somehow, they knew Mama was gone. Traoré stepped out, looked at the crowd, and raised the scarf. "Mama has gone to rest, but her spirit will feed generations." The crowd burst into tears. In less than 12 hours, the news had spread globally. Burkina Faso declared a national day of mourning for Mama Hawa. That night, during a press conference, President Traoré made another promise. Every child in Burkina Faso will know her name. And Denzel, he quietly canceled all his upcoming appearances. "I've played kings and generals," he said, "but today I serve a mother." The next morning, the sun rose gently over Burkina Faso. In the village square sat a simple wooden casket. No golden statues, no velvet ropes, just flowers, drums, silence. President Traoré walked behind the casket, alone, carrying only one thing, the scarf. Denzel followed. His suit was wrinkled from sleep, his eyes red. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. From around the world, leaders sent messages of condolence. But the moment that touched hearts the most, a small boy from Niger arrived. He had walked barefoot for 2 days just to deliver a letter. It read, "Thank you for raising our president." As the casket was lowered into the earth, the village sang. Children wept. Elders held their chests. A bird landed on the grave and didn't move. Then something happened that no one expected. Denzel stepped forward, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a necklace. It was his father's. "She reminds me of him," he whispered, strong, quiet, and never asked for anything. He placed it gently on the grave. "Goodbye, Mama." Even the cameras stopped filming. Some things are too sacred for screens. That night, President Ibrahim Traoré and Denzel Washington sat under the stars on a straw mat. No ceremony, no crowd, just silence. The fire crackled gently between them. They didn't need speeches. They had just buried the woman who shaped both of their lives, one with her hands, the other with her spirit. Then Traoré said, "Denzel, this week, I remembered who I am." Denzel nodded. "Me too." In the quiet of that night, they made a pact, not one written in ink, but sealed in pain, gratitude, and hope. Within hours, plans began for the Mama Hawa Foundation, a joint initiative to provide food, education, and emotional healing for rural children in Burkina Faso and beyond. Denzel committed his full year's salary from his next film to the cause. But the most powerful part wasn't the money. It was the short video Denzel released just before flying home. Looking directly into the camera, he said, "If one woman in a small village can raise a future president and change the heart of a Hollywood actor, then what are we waiting for?" That video reached 100 million views in 24 hours, and the world held its breath for what would come next. 3 days after the funeral, Denzel returned to the U.S. quietly, no press, no fanfare. But the producers of his long-scheduled live interview insisted the show must go on. It had already been promoted worldwide that Denzel agreed on one condition. Let me speak from my heart. No script. The set was bright. The audience excited. Everyone expected light talk. Maybe a joke or two. But when the host asked, Denzel, you've traveled the world. What's one moment that changed your soul? Denzel didn't answer right away. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the scarf. Then, softly into the mic, he said, President Ibrahim Traoré called me, and I couldn't breathe, because he reminded me that greatness isn't in awards. It's in mothers who wash your wounds, and presidents who remember them. The host, visibly confused, asked, and what did he say exactly? Denzel's eyes filled with tears. He slowly picked up his phone, played a voice recording, and let the studio hear Traoré's voice. Thank you for honoring a woman the world forgot, but who made a man the world remembers. Just like that, Denzel broke down again on Live TV. And so did millions watching around the world. The broadcast spread like wildfire. Dinner tables paused. Newsrooms went silent. Social media froze. The clip of Denzel sobbing, clutching the scarf, as Traoré's voice echoed became the most shared video of the year. Comments poured in. I've never cried this hard over a stranger's love. This made me want to call my mom right now. Who is Ibrahim Traoré? Because the world needs more leaders like him. Across Africa, stories of forgotten mothers began to surface. In the U.S., youth groups organized candlelight vigils in honor of Mama Hawa. But in Burkina Faso, something even more unexpected began to happen. Children in rural villages started writing letters. Not to Santa, not to celebrities, but to President Traoré. One letter read, If I work hard like you, will I also make my mother proud? Denzel remained silent after the interview, until the next morning. He posted a photo on Instagram, a single tree in Burkina Faso. The caption, She watered roots that now hold up nations. No hashtags, no promotion, just truth. Exactly 1 week after the surprise call, a statue was quietly unveiled in Ouagadougou. It wasn't of a general, or a king, or a president. It was of a woman holding a child's hand wrapped in a familiar scarf. A bronze plate below read, To Mama Hawa, the mother of all leaders. President Ibrahim Traoré stood before it. Denzel Washington beside him, both holding candles. Neither of them spoke, because some endings are too sacred for words. That night, a soft wind passed through the city. Villagers later said they could feel Mama Hawa's spirit brushing against their cheeks. And in Hollywood, Denzel made one final gesture. He announced a new scholarship, the Hawa Fund, in partnership with the Burkina Faso government, dedicated to girls from rural Africa who dream of leading. As the press begged for quotes, Denzel said only one thing: some phone calls change your schedule. This one changed my soul. Dear viewer, if this story touched your heart, made you cry, made you reflect, or reminded you of someone you love, please like, subscribe, and comment below with, I believe in the power of love and leadership. Your words matter. Let's make stories like this travel across the world. Let's remind people, greatness is not about fame. It's about heart. Drop your thoughts below. Share this with someone who needs hope today. And never forget, one kind act can echo across generations. Thank you for watching.